We will, this is warned as a city council meeting, and so we'll proceed with some of the things that we do in every council meeting, because the council members are not sitting up front here. I'll ask the 5 council members who are here to stand up so you can all see who's here. And Jim Sheridan, if you could just introduce yourself too. You're muted, but okay. Well, we'll acknowledge the presence of Jim Sheridan. He's waving. And
okay, now I'm unmuted, Jack.
There we go. Great. Jim Sheridan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Okay. Anyone who's participating remotely, I'd ask you to change your name display to your first and last name so we all know who's talking to us and who we're talking to. We'll proceed to approve the agenda. We're moving one of the items. So item 4, the public comment item, will be up before the candidate public forums. And we will proceed with that now. Anyone who wishes to address the council must be recognized by the mayor. For the section on public comment, we ask you to limit your comments to 5 minutes. And this is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on any topic that is not on tonight's agenda. So we'll see if there's anyone in the room who's asking to be recognized. And is there anyone online who's asking to be recognized? I'm not seeing, oh, Dave Bellini, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, Dave.
Hey, I'm Dave Bellini. I just want to say quickly, thanks to our city councilors. The meetings that you have with the public, I am really liking them. I think it's a great form of communication. I think it's a great thing that you do, that you have these Saturday meetings that we can all get together. I learn a lot. I learn a lot from you folks, and I learn a lot from other members of the public. And I think it's emblematic of what good government is. So just wanted to say thanks for holding those. I appreciate it. I get a lot out of it.
Thanks, Dave. Tanya, do we have the ability to put the Zoom people up on the screen? Okay. Well, hopefully. Why don't you come on up here and you can speak into my mic.
I don't know if there's any
So, Steve Whitaker, Montpelier, but I want to speak to the process, not the personalities, because the process is exactly where this city keeps failing. Tonight, the city's offering the public an opportunity to engage with finalists for city manager. Whether that information is filtered or not is yet to be seen. Montpelier is not fine. This is a city that's in a crisis of governance, and the candidates must hear that. Whoever we hire is not stepping into a stable organization with some challenges. They're stepping into a city with repeated open meeting and public records violations, active civil rights and due process litigation, ongoing brownfields and environmental compliance crisis, a capital and operating budget that's structurally unsustainable, a staff structure that's grown far beyond what a city of 7,300 people can support. Candidates deserve to know this before they accept the job, not after they sign a contract. Shielding them from that reality is not kindness, it's institutional dishonesty. The staffing reality is the core issue and it's being avoided. The city has roughly twice the staff of comparable municipalities. Many positions are paid at levels that are way out of alignment with both tax market norms and taxpayer capacity. Multiple unions now effectively drive the policy while elected officials defer, not govern. That didn't happen overnight. It happened with a 30-year tenure of a particular city manager who we're glad is gone. Minimal turnover, a culture that equated longevity with accountability. Any serious candidate must be asked, how do you rebalance staffing without collapsing morale? How do you negotiate with unions when the numbers simply don't work? How do you restore managerial authority without scapegoating workers? And how do you tell the public the truth about what can and cannot be afforded? The finalist pool raises some red flags. One finalist never served as a city manager, another left a 3-year contract mid-contract, one presided over a disciplinary action now tied to multi-million-dollar litigation and appears to have a financial parachute elsewhere. That doesn't mean any one of them is unqualified, but it means the margin for error is razor thin. And it means the public has every right to ask hard, unscripted questions, not submit them to a consultant whose job is to close the deal. Filtering public questions is a category error. The council keeps making the same mistake, confusing the public's right to participate with as a threat to be managed. This isn't a developer RFP. This isn't a labor negotiation. This is the single most consequential hire this city will make in a generation. And candidates need to hear it directly in plain language about broken trust, financial stress, environmental liability in a deeply divided community. Then they're being set up to fail, and so is Montpelier. I urge you to, anyway.
Hold on.
I think you got the gist of it.
Listen to this.
This is a fraught situation with, anyway, I'll stop there.
All right, I just want to talk a little bit about how we got here. We retained Ian Coyle of Pracademic Partners to conduct a search for us back in September. We conducted a nationwide search and we received over 30 applications from across Vermont, or from across the country, in fact. We, at every step in the process, every decision has been made by the city council. City council members reviewed all of the applications, decided who to consider for interviews, decided who to interview. We conducted a series of interviews, and of the candidates we interviewed, we selected some to have a second round of interviews. We went through that second round of interviews, and based on everything we learned about the candidates, we narrowed it down to 3 finalists for this position. One of those finalists has withdrawn, so we have 2 candidates that we're going to be meeting tonight. The plan is to have members of the public interview or interact with both of our candidates, and we will then be taking up the decision at our regularly scheduled council meeting Wednesday night. We have paper surveys that people can fill out in the back of the room. We also have QR codes, so anyone who wants to participate by going online and filling out the survey, you'll have the ability to do that. And I'm hoping this is a productive conversation. I have been on record, and I think everyone on the council is on record as concluding that our determination is to select the best candidate for this position. And if that means we don't have a candidate that we're comfortable hiring at this stage, we will reopen the search, hoping it doesn't come to that. But our hope is that we have 2 good candidates who will be ready to take on this big challenge. And from there, I'll turn it over to Ian.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Jack. We're going to get right to it with the Q&A portion, but before we do, just a couple of logistical items here that I would like to cover. First of all, thank you all for coming. I know you've got a lot going on in your lives and you're here and you want to hear from the candidates and you want to ask questions. So on behalf of the council and the mayor, thank you for being here. We appreciate your attendance and your participation. We have two, they're back to back, so we're aiming for around an hour. We're going to extend that out obviously a little bit based on how and when we started. We're going to ask a candidate, in this case, Kelly, to start off with, a very short bio, why they're here, why they want this position, what brings them to this, spot in their professional lives right now. I'm going to serve as a moderator. We have questions coming in via Zoom. We anticipate obviously questions coming in from here. I think we have a small enough audience size where once we get going with the Q&A period, I have a couple of questions that have come in via Zoom that Tanya's writing down. If you have questions that you'd like to write down, we've got index cards in the back. And I think we can kind of be free flowing with this a little bit, as long as, you're to accommodate as many questions as we possibly can. If you're relatively short with your questions, that would be fantastic. But I will go around and, bring the mic to you, just kind of raise your hand a little bit. And we'll kind of have that, we'll have to have a kind of interaction a little bit because we have it coming in via the Zoom. And we've got them coming in here in person. So again, we will do our best to get through all the questions. If we get two of the same type of question, we'll consolidate it. Otherwise, we really, I'm not doing any screening. I'm just reading whatever is handed to me, and you're welcome to ask any question that's on your mind. Let's see, if you are on Zoom, I believe in the chat area, you can enter in your questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Kelly. Oh, sorry, Jack, what'd I miss?
I just wanted to mention one thing that I couldn't forgive myself if I failed to mention this, which is that the work, this has been a very labor intensive process, and we really need to give great credit to our HR director, Tanya Chambers, and our public information person, Evelyn Prim. They've been working hard every day on top of their regular work to put this together. Evelyn's not here in person because she's sick tonight, but really, Tanya and Evelyn, you have done great work, and I really appreciate what you've done.
All right, thank you. I will now turn it over to Kelly, kind of kick us off, and then we will get right into the Q&A portion. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Kelly McNicholas Curry. I am really grateful and happy to be here at this point in your process. I can tell that you all are taking this with a very serious consideration, as am I, as we both explore the right fit for the future of your city manager. I have a 25-year career in public service, and 13 of those years have been spent in local government. I'm currently an elected county commissioner in Pitkin County, Colorado, where Aspen is the city, the county seat. It's a complex organization. Counties in Colorado have a lot of authority. We have 27 departments, and I steward a $258 million budget with a number of direct reports to me. I also am an executive director of a nonprofit organization that is focused on affordable workforce housing. I'll talk a little bit about some of those details later. I was previously the elections manager, where I ran the elections department inside the elected county clerk's office, in charge of multiple elections each year, all of the policies and procedures for implementing a new full mail balloting system in Colorado, and hiring and training up to 100 staff to execute those elections. Prior to that, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa. And before that, worked for the Sierra Club, where I was a community organizer. And each of these steps in my career have built on each other to lead me here, I think, tonight, where learning as an organizer to knock on doors, talk to neighbors, advocate for right decisions at my government at the local, state, and federal level, and then wanted to go on into the Peace Corps and do environmental projects, where I was lucky to be assigned to work focused on food security and income generation. And while I lived there, really learned about the importance of good governance and how accountable, transparent government could really make material improvements in people's lives at the most basic levels. From that, wanting to strengthen democracy by focusing on elections and doing that in a nonpartisan way, and then an opportunity to run for office and advocate for policies that were near to me and aligned with the values of my community became.
Oh, thank you. I'll come get some more wine.
I'd like some wine too. And, from there have had some transformational successes in my tenure as an elected, and also, now running a nonprofit on a project that is really special to me, where we are looking to preserve mobile home parks as a naturally occurring source of affordable housing and improving the infrastructure and life, health, safety systems for the residents that live there in preparation of selling the park to them where they could preserve it. And their build equity for themselves into the future. I know the goals for the community right now include infrastructure and housing and economic development, and I bring a number of successes along those lines. Currently running this water, sewer, and bridge replacement project at $3 million, requiring a lot of detail towards cost control. A major airport redevelopment project in the county, which is a generational $500 million project with a lot of community stakeholdering that occurred, and planning and fundraising with the community to do that. A multimodal project connecting one of our major transit lots with parks and open space amenities, and researching the feasibility and funding options for that. Installing a new bridge, which achieved, goals along multiple fronts, including resiliency and environmental sustainability improvements for that replacement. And then a jail planning project, including not only looking at the facilities, but looking at how the space is used and how all of our systems in public safety interact with it, including the courts and our public defenders and legal aid, et cetera. So that's some of the infrastructure work experience that I bring. Housing, this is an area where when I started in my elected role 7 years ago, I knew it was important. I didn't know a lot about it, and I've since become an expert around the state on housing issues in Colorado, and have figured out many strategies that we have deployed in order to deal with the housing issues. As you might imagine, workforce housing competes with free market housing in Aspen, and it is completely untenable. And so the government has had to play a major stakeholder and partnership role. And I sit on our housing authority board. It's one of the oldest in the country at 40 years old. We have almost 4,000 housing units in our inventory. And we've made more mistakes than many communities can envision at their beginning stages of a housing program, which lessons learned I would love to bring to Montpelier. We've also attacked housing opportunity through our zoning and land use code improvements, and using that as a tool to help incentivize housing as well. I look at housing as a spectrum. You can go anywhere from being unhoused to subsidized housing to free market rental, all the way to senior housing. And for it to really function healthily, it needs to be able to work along that whole spectrum. Our community also suffers from homelessness concerns and unhoused population that we're trying to serve daily. And we've had some successes and some very similar obstacles that I think Montpelier has had in terms of finding permanent shelter locations and getting people into wraparound services so that they can move quickly out of housing and make it rare and infrequent. Relative to economic development, I'll be honest, our county doesn't do a ton of that, but we do some through our commercial business zones, where we've invested in infrastructure improvements and circulation improvements for better traffic flow and pedestrian and bike flow. Through there, we've invested in a village where we have a small district that relies on tourism through improving parks amenities, street amenities, some speed slowing investments there, as well as helping them to purchase a museum that is now a real anchor institution in that village. And we've looked again to our land use code where we could promote commercial uses in our mixed zones. I'm sure some of this stuff will come up in detail. Happy to talk more in detail, all of it. I'll say I bring great skills for community engagement and right sizing that engagement. So we have, it's not overwhelming for the community, and yet the input is very meaningful for decision making. I build partnerships that are sometimes unexpected. I've been able to recruit support for projects where it's not been obvious that support would be aligned, including intergovernmental support, private support, and philanthropic support. Budget management, this is a hot topic. This is the thing to do in Montpelier. You all have very ambitious goals and limited resources to do it. I personally love budgeting. I think that it is the allocation of resources to your values. It is about the most important thing that local government does. And I work to break down silos and align our work across multiple goal areas and have departments pulling and rowing together. This will be particularly important as resiliency is a main focus for the community. Some of my personal attributes: I'm tenacious, I'm enthusiastic, I bring a positive attitude towards work, towards building teams. I'm thick-skinned, I'm very committed to public service, and you'll find me to be organized. I have not been a city manager before, but I've done hard things, and I've done hard things that I hadn't done previously. I hadn't been an elections manager before I was an elections manager. We ran excellent elections. I hadn't been a nonprofit executive director before the board hired me to do it, and we've hit it out of the park. And I've had transformational solutions as a county commissioner as well. And the community I work in has shared values with Montpelier. It's a community committed to sustainability, inclusion, resiliency, a outdoor ethos, and conservation ethic. And that's why I've applied for this job. That's why I've spent the last, several days exploring Montpelier and going to the Unitarian Church and cross-country skiing at Country Club Road and visiting the school to determine if this is a right fit for my family and my children in elementary school. I've really, really enjoyed being here, and I see that the community spirit here is really alive and thriving. And so thank you for your consideration. I look forward to your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully that wasn't too long.
Well, I'm going to kind of go back and forth here. So I'm going to get to a couple questions here, and then I'm going to go right to the crowd here. So very first one that came in: have you watched a council meeting? ? And how will you handle disruptive behavior during council meetings?
Yes, I have watched council meetings. I'm grateful that there's the ability to access that. I think that that's the world we live in now. The commission I sit on is also televised publicly and able to be viewed after the fact. I think that processes and norms of decorum are very important to uphold, and that's why we create them, because they create fairness for everyone who is engaging in council meetings. And I think you have to stick to them in order to maintain that fairness. Allowing people to run over, that's often the mayor or the chair's discretion to do so. They're welcome to do that. But we want to keep the process on track. We want to respect everybody's time, and we want to move along through the agenda because you all have important work to do and get done. And so, I politely but firmly am happy to support the council in retaining those rules of decorum and those procedural policies that are set forth for how meetings should be run.
Thank you. I'm going to bounce back and forth. So I'm going to go to the crowd here. You had a question?
Hi, thanks for being here. My name is Kate McCarthy. You've heard about the problems. People will always talk about the problems. And I want to say some of them in Montpelier are due to just the complexity of the world. A lot of the things we're struggling with are similar to places across the country. No surprise there. Some of the challenges we face are due to inertia and are going to require some growth, some change, and some innovation. And so my question is about growth and change and innovation. And it is, how do you help people reach agreement, especially when they think they're polarized, which not all of us believe we are? How do you help people reach agreement on the need for change and the solutions? And do you have any examples you'd like to give us of that?
Sure. Yes, I mean, I would say, and I said this during our meeting with staff earlier today, that one of my expectations for managing staff is a growth mindset and a willingness to pivot quickly. And so those are things that I'm going to carry forward in, administering and supervising staff at the city level. I often think that what may seem like polarization is actually just a trade-off of values. And, these are not situations where it's right versus wrong. These are situations that are right versus right. And certain counselors may fall on the side of prioritizing some values, and certain counselors may fall on the side of prioritizing other values. And I think by reminding folks that those are all valid, and they all are community serving, I think will help dispel some of that maybe contradictions or what might seem as polarization. I come from a community that has been very innovative, and that an organization that is thriving, I would say, and look forward to bringing some of the strategies from there to here in order to affect some change and growth. Again, my expectation on staff is going to be, let's have a growth mindset, let's challenge each other and look to pivot together. Would be, I think, partially how I would answer that. I also just will observe that, my experience in Montpelier in a few days has been quite lovely. And I've really observed what I feel to be a mostly thriving city and a very heavily community engaged place. And those are strengths on which to build on. So from an outsider's view, I think there's a lot of assets here on which to leverage for the growth and change that you all hope for.
Next question is centered around trust. Couple of questions on trust. So how do you build trust between the city government staff and the council? And how do you garner trust with your own staff as you build your team?
Great. So I'm a person that, is very relationship oriented. I believe that not only should we solve problems, but we should come out stronger as an organization throughout that process. And so that for me is one of the ways that I benchmark my own success in terms of building community, creating solutions. And, the way that I build trust is I communicate openly, I'm accessible. I expect that I will start norms here relative to how frequently and to the extent that I communicate within staff internally as well as externally. And so sharing information, sharing what we're doing, sharing the achievements that we have. I think that in a town where you're resource constrained, you have to celebrate the small stuff and you have to celebrate the people who are making that happen. And the community should know who those people are and what they're doing and how they serve you. The way that I build trust among staff is through designing solutions together. I'm going to come in with some ideas. I'm going to come in and draw off the innovation from the communities that I have lived in. And I'm also going to recognize that there is a depth of expertise that exists about Montpelier, about the topics that the staff are in charge of. And I co-design solutions with them. This has been something that I have been trained in. This is something that I use in my nonprofit work. It's part of our board approach for the nonprofit, is that we work together on building solutions. We test solutions in their early designs, and we iterate on them. And so we're in a constant improvement mode. And that's how, by including staff, by celebrating our achievements, large and small, together, by being accessible and transparent, and by giving quick feedback, I believe that I'll build trust, both at the staff level and emulate that with the community as well. Was there any part of that I forgot?
No, I think you got it. I'm sorry. Do you have a question first or no? Okay, I'll get to you. Just think.
Jack.
Hi there, Anthony Arpino. Welcome to our community. I just want to take a quick second to thank the council for the process. I've been very excited for this leadership change in Montpelier, and I think it's wonderful that we've been able to attract candidates with experience like we're hearing about tonight. So one of the challenges I think of our city government is that the council manager structure has an imbalance of information access. The manager is a full-time six-figure salaried employee, and our hardworking counselors are basically glorified volunteers for what we pay them to do their work, and many of them are also working full-time jobs. So how would you make sure that the counselors who are ultimately responsible for setting the policy of the city are getting the information that they need to do so in a timely and efficient way?
So, I believe that working with the council is a predominant portion of the job of city manager. It's probably 30 to 40% of the work of a manager in this structure, because wanting to build relationships with them individually, understanding what their passion projects are, identifying flags early on in the process, I think is really important. Collecting questions and information and making sure that that's shared equitably among the whole council is part of the responsibility. And so, right now I have a very intentional relationship with my manager, and I expect to do the same with the counselors as well. This will involve onboarding new city councilors by taking them around with staff, by showing them projects, by spending time one-on-one even before they're elected as candidates to help understand the functions of city government. This will involve regular meetings with the mayor in order to set the agendas and make sure that staff are fully prepared for those. And, spend the time understanding what questions we can anticipate, what hot topics or landmines politically might be coming with a relevant topic, and how we might be prepared to respond to those with the public. And so that's my approach, I think. And it is a challenging job. I think local government has gotten more challenging. I think serving in local elected service has gotten more challenging these days, but it still continues to be incredibly meaningful. And ultimately, the council is accountable to the community. And my job is to implement their vision and goals.
One question from the written ones, and I'll get to you, sir. Have you ever done or managed zero-based budgeting? And if so, do you think this would be a good way to handle the challenging budgets that the city has been facing?
I don't think we would call it zero-based budgeting necessarily, but I do recognize that the budgeting constraints of the community are ongoing, and that even trying to figure out how to respond to costs related to inflation are challenging. Right now, it seems that the budget in Montpelier is challenged by a number of things, and even looking at just inflation can make that harder, because construction inflation is not the same as cost of living inflation. They can be very different, and they can put pressures on the budget in the way that we have to respond to. And I also recognize that the community is wrestling with their own affordability issues as well. And that these are serious conversations and a serious balance for the council to figure out. Now, what I see as my role is to bring options and to very clearly delineate what the trade-offs to those options are, what the risks to options are, for the council to consider and decide. And that's going to involve, what do we take off staff's plate? If there's a focus on certain things that are new or expanded, it may have to result in contraction somewhere else. And, that's the conversation that we have to have, and frankly have to lean into. I'm always going to look to alignment with strategic plans. And I'm going to ask, how do the budgets directly facilitate the delivery of the goals in the strategic plan? And that's going to be part of what I balance when presenting options to council for budgets.
Great.
Thank you. My name's Alex Geller. I guess this question is really around change. So what was the most significant change, organizational change effort that you participated in? What was your role? What was the biggest challenge? What did you learn? What didn't work?
Sure. I think there's been a number of organizational changes that I've had to steward over the course of my recent experience as a county commissioner. Some of that has involved state mandates that were handed down that we had to simply figure out a path to respond to. For example, the state of Colorado completely changed how counties were expected to deal with public health and how to create public health administrations at the local level. This started in the 2 years preceding the pandemic. So there was a little bit of footing, at least, because of that change. And then, when the pandemic came along, we had to really pivot and build up that department in a number of ways. It caused restructuring of our broader human services department to pull staff from that department into what was a required new public health department, and had to rely on intergovernmental agreements with other surrounding governments so we could leverage each other's resources to meet this goal and to meet this mandate from the state. And so there was cost sharing, there was services that that one department would manage for multiple governments and vice versa. We kind of divided up the work and figured out how to get it covered and meet the mandate while also managing the budget, and then figuring out strategies to increase the budget, increase staffing for that over time. Some of that was expedited in response to the pandemic and the need for a thorough public health response. And there were definitely challenges with that. There were challenges with not having epidemiology resources early on in the pandemic. There were challenges with having an inexperienced public health director early on in the pandemic. We worked through them in the best way that we could. It was stressful, and it was stress on staff, it was stress on community. We were trying to figure out how to do all of this from home. But I think in the end, we met our requirements in a way that we best could, even if not ideal.
I'm going to go to one of the submitted questions here. Why do you want this job in the little city full of opinionated, overly educated people concerned about their taxes? Present company excluded.
Well, I come from a community of opinionated, overly educated people concerned about their taxes. So I definitely think there is alignment there. I definitely will say the community I live in has very high expectations for community engagement, transparency, and communication. And so I think that there is a lot of alignment with what I am learning to be the expectations of Montpelier. I'm looking for a change in my career and, doing something different. I have enjoyed being an elected. I could continue to be an elected or run for office again, and would probably be able to stay in that role for another 4 years. But I want to transition to actually more hands-on management of people and projects and budgets like I have done in the past, and get back to that. I think that it feels like the right time to make that transition back again to supervising administration in my career. The town of Montpelier, the city of Montpelier, is very appealing because of the values alignment that I mentioned before. I love winter. I'm not looking to move or get hired anywhere that is in a sunny climb all year long. And you know, the community orientation, the progressive values, and the commitment to inclusivity and conservation are things that really resonate well with me. I think that this is a right-sized organization at this point in my career to bring the leadership skills that I have cultivated. I have been working and talking closely with my current county manager, who has been a mentor to me about local government administration, and, you know, have really picked his brain about kind of size and scope, right sizing for what I can bring and offer. And so the city of Montpelier in this job feels right. I won't say that I don't have concerns about the opportunities that lie ahead. I definitely recognize that, you know, this will be a job that I am going to be working at 80 hours a week, and it's going to take up a lot of my time and commitment. And, you know, I'm still very excited about it. And I think that, you know, the positivity that I can bring from an outside perspective can be a refreshing growth for all of us.
Thank you. I have some up here, but I wanted to go to the crowd quick. Anybody? Okay, here we go.
Thank you. My name is Gary Holloway. I think you answered most of my first questions. Was a two-part question. Was, you know, why move your family to Vermont? You kind of answered it, but I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more. Like, what's drawing you to Vermont at this stage in your career to move across the country? And then two, in the little time that you've learned about the city of Montpelier as you've applied for this position, knowing what you know about the city now, what would you do in your early days in the position in your first year? Like, what would you prioritize knowing what you know now?
Well, thank you for that. Yes, you know, I have made big moves around the country and the world in my life. Having grown up in Ohio, and then right before high school moved to Connecticut, and then from there all the way out into, you know, the behind the redwood curtain in Northern California, and then to the East Coast. I have a large extended family that are mostly based in New York and New Jersey, and then across to West Africa, and then to Colorado, and they have all been great moves. And they have similarly come at a time where I have been investigating opportunities for a change in my life, and have been wonderful places to live with, you know, thriving communities that offer things that I like to do, and, you know, activities that I want to be engaged in, which is how I feel about the city of Montpelier. And so, you know, that is why I'm very seriously considering making this move and taking this job. Moving out of Aspen, Colorado, it's a wonderful place to live. It is not everything. It has a lot of challenges, and I question regularly if it's a place where I want to raise my children. You know, there's a lot of disparities in wealth. It creates kind of two communities that don't interact and live separate parallel lives, which doesn't reflect how I want to be engaged in a community. And I don't feel that in the city of Montpelier. I feel it feels much more grounded, much more connected to one another. And so that's part of what my experience has been here about reflecting on that decision. And then I'm sorry, the second part of your question was?
Yeah, as far as what you know about Montpelier.
Yeah.
What would you prioritize?
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've really been thinking a lot about kind of a 90-day plan, how I communicate internally, how I communicate with the community, how I get to know council and the staff. You know, I will be looking at some things like reorganization and where that might make sense, you know, again, I want to balance what I've been able to research in a few months' time with what you have all experienced on the ground for your lived life. But some things that stand out to me are, you know, should we reorganize staff in some ways where people report differently, where there's opportunities to cultivate more leadership skill development, is one thing I'll ask. I'm going to look at institutional imbalances. So like, I'm really interested in understanding why the insurance costs inflation is such what it is for the staff. Are there some foundational solutions that we could create that might be cheaper? We've been able to do some of that in my current, community in order to hold increases lower than what they have been. You have a lot of citizen boards. I am curious if some of those work can be combined, if some of that work is maybe from a different time, and should be reevaluated for its effectiveness and purpose now. It takes staff time to manage these boards. So again, asking, how is staff work planning aligned with the critical goals that you all have and the success and objectives for achieving those goals? Are we doing that? So those are some of the things I've started thinking about.
Thank you. Question from the Zoom. We have an aging, failing infrastructure, particularly water, sewer, not adequately maintained for 25 years, and the need could be $50 to $80 million. How can you help create community and financial commitments necessary to start addressing this crisis?
Well, I would have to understand the crisis more. I toured both plants today, and was grateful to have some exposure to that. I'm not sure if the crisis is the distribution lines that are if that's what's being raised here, or if it has to do with the actual function of the plants. It seems like there's capacity in both plants. I will use this as an opportunity to just highlight that, I ask for money from anybody and I build partnerships early. I try to find, relationships or I try to find alignment among possible partners, possible grantors, and figure out, where do our goals align? And do you have resources that we can help implement to achieve those goals? I've been successful at doing that in my current community for infrastructure, for housing, and I would bring sort of that same kind of creativity here. And that hopefully might help identify some solutions. I think for infrastructure, they're doing this already, but I would just be looking to, like, what is our planning horizon and how can we just be incrementally over time, kind of knocking a little bit off the block in terms of replacements of infrastructure. Because I think that mainly is a responsible way for planning capital improvements over time when you are resource challenged. And then I would also be looking for, how do we build in resiliency through all of these projects? Because this is, I think, crucial to Montpelier. You have a lot of natural disaster risk here that any of these projects, I think, for them to be a full success, need to be improvements that increase resiliency into the future.
Another question here from the Zoom. What is the largest number of staff and direct reports you have managed? And how did you maintain a balance between the need for both accountability and staff morale?
So right now I manage an executive team of 2 administrators and 7 department heads at the county. And then for my nonprofit job, I don't have direct staff. We're a very small nonprofit, but I manage 6, consultants and contractors over a variety of service delivery lines. So our accounting, our owner's rep, construction project management, engineer team, auditors. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but that is how, our community organizer. So that is what my experience has been with that. I am a person that builds trust one-on-one, and through that I build team collaboration overall. And, I expect frank dialogue. I want to create situations where staff feels safe to be frank with each other and with me, so we can really get to the root of any issues, or we can get to the opportunities, the innovations that people would like to drive forward and determine whether they're feasible or not. Again, I do that by being approachable. I do that by, by listening, being a great listener. I also do that by communicating regularly and clearly.
Any questions from the crowd before I go to some other written ones? Gentleman in the back.
Yeah, I'm with Dal. I'm really curious about what your experience is with staff evaluations. Feel like that's something we really need here so that staff know what is their job and are they meeting the requirements of that job. So I'd like to hear you talk about staff evaluation.
Sure. Yeah, and that's those things have changed differently over time. My experience has been that certain approaches come in and out of fashion in the human resources world. But that has been as far as creating a merit-based evaluation systems that were then deployed throughout the entire organization of 300 plus staff, where there were overarching goals that everyone was expected up against which to be evaluated, and then department-specific goals against which they were expected to be evaluated, and then points assigned to that, and then raises aligned with those merit-based evaluations. Currently, I review performance of my direct reports with more of a coaching methodology where we meet regularly to provide feedback. And then, we don't tie our raises to those. Our raises are essentially fairly distributed across personnel based on the budget allocated from year to year. But the coaching is where we engage with performance improvement. And that is sometimes done informally, directly with supervisors to staff. And sometimes that's done more formally with bringing in outside resources or offering opportunities for outside training. I also require 365-degree evaluations so that, I'm hearing not just from people who are being supervised, but also the people who report to them and the support that they're getting, to excel on their job as well.
Thank you. Written question. We are a very old community without the housing or jobs necessary to support a younger cohort. What experience can you bring to create workforce housing in a city with a declining economic base and a fixed aging population? Again, present company excluded.
Yeah, I mean, this will be some of the major work that the new city manager will be tasked with developing for city council. And there are a number of strategies that I have worked on to deliver housing in my community. Some of these involve tax credit properties. And so, working with on lower income tax credit properties to be able to make that more appealing to private developers who then the tax credit gets paid off over time. Those can have some issues. All I find in the housing world, you kind of pull one thread and some unintended consequences might come up elsewhere. Strategies that have worked have been being able to provide the horizontal infrastructure to a developer or to partners in development to then build. And so we've had success with that, where, the investment has been in the sewer, the water, the roads, the ownership of the land, but not the actual stick-built structures. That's where a developer comes in, or you partner and create partnerships with other interested institutions. So for example, like we have been successful because of just the extreme pressure on housing prices. Where I live, many of the local governments and local businesses have become partners in the solutions. And so, the school district brings resources, the ski company brings resources, the hospital brings resources, another municipality brings resources. Over time, you build a package of capital that can then deliver some housing. The coffers sort of get refilled. You build new partnerships where a little bit in the future, you're able to deliver some housing. I think that, there's programs relative to ADUs where, I worked on a package of like template ADUs that people could rely on to add on to their properties or build in their backyards and have quick permitting approvals relative to those. We have a big push for deed restricted housing. That may not be as relevant here. That is something the council will have to consider, but because the real estate pressures never go down over time where I live, making sure that that is affordable in perpetuity has been an important tool for us to institute and then figure out how to manage. Somebody has to manage those deed restrictions over time. Hotel conversions. This is a program that I helped work at for state legislative approvals and funding to help support the conversions of old hotels and motels, generally into permanent supportive housing, but sometimes into affordable workforce housing as well. So there's a lot of strategies. I bring a depth of knowledge in this area to figure out how these might work in Montpelier. Again, the resource constraints are real. Partnerships are going to be imperative. And figuring out how we best leverage what the city has and can do, I think is going to set us up for success there.
Thank you, Kelly. What should the role of governments be? Federal, state, and municipal? Where should the lines be?
No, I like these big picture questions. I mean, this is, this is why I have found that having strong democracies is critical to people's material well-being. And the challenges that we have don't undermine how important this system is. So I think government needs to be accountable. And that generally runs directly through, the council in direct elections for people who represent you and responding to the needs of the people. I think the manager's role is to translate that into action and to stay focused and to marshal the resources together to do that. I think that, finding the right lane and staying in the right lane is also important. I think that, there are things that governments are required to do and things that governments are asked to do, and they are not always one and the same. And we have to be very intentional on when to decide to move into more of the discretionary type of work, because that does put challenges on the mandated services we need to provide, whether through state or local or federal requirements. Government should minimize risk to the community and, to itself as an organization. And, I will always be attentive to doing that.
Thank you. Couple more written ones. So want to check from the crowd before I do that. Sir in the back. Yep. I'm coming your way. Hold on.
Hi, my name is Stephen Pine. The question I have is, Montpelier being the state capital creates a very sort of interesting relationship with the state. One of it is tremendous amount of both positive things and areas of concern. I mean, a lot of the bright people in the town that have involvement with state. A lot of the pressures on the town are state pressures. And what's your experience working with a town and its relationship with the state partners?
I think I have a really great analogy, if it's not that, but because, where I live, where Pickens County is, 84% of our land mass is federal land. And so the relationship is more between local government and the federal agencies than it is, I'd say, with the state. I mean, we have tensions with the state. The county government is an arm of the state. We're expected to implement some of the mandates as set forward by the state. Our authorities only come from the state. This definitely produces tensions. For example, we would love to have like business licensing capabilities for a variety of reasons, that we don't have that authority from the state. So we have to ask them for it and hope they give it to us in order to implement some of the community goals that we might want around that. For the federal government, the tension really comes with how are those federal lands managed? And, right now there's been a real abdication of that from the federal government. And so we have had to frankly manage service demands and limit and try and kind of bring in and ratchet down some of the public amenities, public service demands that the public has come to expect, but the federal government is no longer delivering, and the county cannot fully absorb. We have, and so just in plain speak, what that looks like, we have one of the most visited recreation areas, the Maroon Bells recreation area is widely photographed. It's beautiful. It's one of the top spots that people come to when they visit federal, public lands. And, we have had to shut down services there. We have built up reliance on volunteers to deliver services there. So it has been a real challenge. In the past, we've had, I think healthy and productive relationships, and we continue to try to have healthy and productive relationships with our federal partners. But they're, the impacts trickle down locally and have to be managed locally. We have to respond to them locally, and we're doing our best, but they're not one-to-one. And we try to, bring our story and our advocacy to the federal government for them to understand the impacts of this. So, I definitely recognize that there's a tension there. I think that the state should be a partner in the city of Montpelier's success, as the capital city. I expect that partnership. I don't know what that totally looks like at this point in this seat at this time right now, but that would be something that, I would want to foster kind of a healthy partnership.
Thank you. Written question, how will you leverage technology to help bridge the gap between staff bandwidth and community demand for services?
Yeah, I think that you have to right size these things. You can really go down a rabbit hole for technological solutions that may or may not deliver the promise of those solutions. And frankly, one of the things that has been frustrating for me over time in my elected seat is actually seeing that the technological services require more staff capacity to manage. And so there needs to be a sensitivity there about properly selecting where we're going to get our bang for our buck. And I do know from staff input that there is definitely a desire to modernize, how they work. And I think that's completely reasonable to do over time. And as much as possible, have that be forward facing. It would have to be a priority for the council to decide how much to invest in that. But there are, a number of tools that make, appropriations and expenditures like real-time, have real-time access to the public. And so, if that is something that council wishes to see more of, I'd be happy to put together, some information to present on that. But I think focusing on the staff side in ways to help them either build capacity or manage workload, I think is appropriate.
Thank you. I do have another written question, but wanted to go to the crowd first. Yep.
I'm Tom McComb. Kelly, it seems that you enjoy working with people and that you value developing one-on-one relationships and trust. Of course, that's a two-way street. Can you give us an example of a time you've needed to work with somebody where the two of you didn't see eye to eye and had a hard time working together, whether it's actually a person you were, a fellow employee or somebody outside of the office, but somebody you had to work with, and how you dealt with that?
Sure. Yeah. Sir, I serve on a board of 5 currently. A lot of times our values are aligned and the details and decisions may be misaligned. And so, I really try to kind of work one-on-one with my fellow commissioners on understanding the heart of the disagreement and finding out if there are ways that I can compromise on it or ways that I can propose compromises to them so we can meet closer in the middle. And, you know, I've had to do this for a number of issues that we have been wrestling with. One, building out our housing program. You know, there's a lot of commitment towards affordable housing in my community. There's also a lot of demand for preservation of rural character in my community, and those can be in conflict sometimes. I don't think they always have to be. And so figuring out ways to structure a housing program that did not undermine rural character, generate sprawl, generate demand on services, extension of sewer, water, electricity out to places that would facilitate sprawl, and putting in protective measures that I think achieved both of our goals is one example. And it took years. You know, it really took years to slowly build resources for staff to work on things, to create staff capacity to even envision what a housing program might look like, to survey the public on what the appetite, the amount, the location, the types of housing, and then build support for funding and implementation of that housing program has been one area. I'm working on right now I'm working on trying to move a similar approach forward with a bridges project as well, and it requires compromise. And in the end, you know, I have personally found that despite being frustrated at times or having more urgency early on, in the end, the final product was better.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. While we're maybe trying to figure that out, I have one written question. You did answer this in part with an answer to one of the other earlier questions, but how are you thinking about the transition from being in an elected role to being in a role that serves elected officials?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I definitely expect that question to come up. You know, I think in my case, it is an asset to have served in an elected role and make the transition to an administrative role, because I think it will help translate between staff and between the council. And you know, just I went the other way too. I went from being staff to elected and now moving from elected back to staff. And because I'm very sensitive, I think, to what the council will want to see in terms of options, and will also, you know, not want to be led. If there's something I've learned being on elected board, electeds do not want their decisions to be presumed for them, nor should they, because the electeds are who are accountable to the people. And, you know, delivering options, weighing out the pros and cons, looking at the risk, identifying political trade-offs. You know, I see that as the goal of the manager, and doing that in a way that leaves options and deliberation totally open for council. Vice versa, I think, because I have also been staff and I have always been very protective of staff credibility as an elected, that I will continue to do that in the role as manager as well, because, you know, I don't want, staff should not be personally persecuted. You know, staff's technical expertise has been cultivated over many experiences, many years of learning, many years of training, and I can advocate for those skills and experience to inform the decisions of council. You know, like I said, I could remain in elected office. I am feeling ready to transition out of it. It is, you know, it's been a great chapter. It's not something that I'm holding dear to. I additionally, in my role as election manager, I worked in a very nonpartisan, way. I represented everybody regardless of political affiliation. I worked very closely with both the Republican and Democratic parties, continue to maintain very close relationships with those party chairs and leadership. And, that is my approach to, I think, making that transition. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we are trying to see if we can get that person to ask a question, but we have about, yeah, okay. Yeah, can she ask it through there or no? Well, we are trying to figure that out. There was a gentleman here and then we'll see if we can do that.
Maybe in the chat.
Peter Kelman.
Hi, Peter.
Hi. I asked the question about zero-based budgeting, and the reason I asked it, so let me just get back to it. In our system, our city council changes constantly. Our staff, up until recently, doesn't change. We had a city manager for 30 years. So in many ways, the city manager ran the city. He was the constant. And the staff, many of the staff have been around for a while now. And when you have people who've been around for a while, they're used to things. Oh yeah, what did we get last year? Let's do it this year. The advantage of zero-based budgeting is it's based on strategic planning, not on what you did last year. So I would like you to just take a little bit or tell us a little bit about how you do budgeting when it's been done a certain way. There's a lot of legacy.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I won't bring that same legacy because I'll approach it differently, being a new manager coming from a new and different
crimes. You can't kill.
I would say that
those sorts of things.
There are certain things that are going to be fixed in the budget, which the community will have an opportunity to vote on yes or no. And so I think that is an important engagement point in the budgeting process. There are certain things that are going to be slightly out of the hands of council's options relative to collective bargaining agreements and how that impacts the budget. I think that you, from what I can tell this year, have been presented with something of a, hold everything steady without any increases and have been explained the trade-offs to that. And so I think it's, I don't look at it as because you got what you got last year, you have to spend what you have to spend the same thing again. That's not how I approach it. I do think that you need to recognize where you have investments that are longer than a year and what it means to continue those investments, whether that be staff positions. You can cut staff from year to year, but a lot of times you're looking at how are we increasing capacity here for a longer period of time than just the budget year in front of you. And Montpelier's had to make those hard decisions recently about budgeting, and it's going to have to do that again. I agree with you that the strategic plan absolutely should be how you budget. You're going to have a couple things you need to look at. First off, what are your mandates? Those are the things that you need to budget to in order to be in compliance with law. What are your goals? That's what your strategic plan is going to lay out. And how is your money furthering that along? And I think I've said that I'm going to, be very focused on making sure that those resources are shepherded in the right ways. That's also going to mean we might need to deliver services on some other things differently than it's been done in the past. And so I won't bring that inertia because I won't really know what it is, right? From what has just been carried over in the past. And also will challenge maybe that we look at it differently and decide, are we doing this the right way? Are we working on the things we need to be working on?
All right, I think we're going to try to, if there's a Dee Dee Brush has her hand up for a question. So if you can hear me out there, ask your question. And if you can't do it verbally, you can try to do it in the chat as well.
Dee Dee, it looks like you're muted right now, so you'll need to unmute.
All right, thank you. Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have a kind of a two-part question, and one of them has to do with the evaluation of the workforce of the city, which I think is quite a large staff considering the size of our town. And there have been many, many comments over the last few years about how we seem to have a very, very fat staffing. And yet several of the core services are understaffed, such as public works, excuse me. So I have one question is, how would you approach looking at, as if you were chosen as a city manager, how would you look at the staffing currently, and how would you decide what, if anything, could be pared down? Because I think we are more flush than we need to be. And secondly, the other, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a two-part question, but the second part of my question is, do you have given what you've learned about Montpelier so far, do you have any brainstorms or ideas as to how to increase the economic development of this little town, which has been struggling for a long time? We can no longer afford city budgets that increase by 11% and more every year. That's just the city portion of the budget. So, okay, I will not belabor the question. That's kind of the part. Those are the parts that I'd like to hear you on.
Great. Thank you, Dee Dee. I appreciate you joining us over Zoom. Yeah, and some of, I think, what I touched on before that I absolutely will do as part of my initial transition into the role is to evaluate the workforce and staff work plans. I really would like to understand, what is there's a couple ways to tackle it. What is the required amount of staffing necessary to cover all the shifts that you need to have covered? Certain things run 24 hours a day. You need to make sure you have adequate staff to be running those in a healthy fashion. Some of it has to do with just best practice. What is the best practice for a sizing of a police force? How are we reaching that, or how are we not reaching that? As one example, these are things that I definitely will be considering. I also, understand from some of the staff input is they would like to be evaluating their job descriptions as well. And, I think determining whether those descriptions are aligning with the goals of the city and the work plan is the job of a city manager to do on a regular basis. And it helps inform where can you cross-utilize staff in different ways, perhaps that are different. As a manager, I also want to promote and uplift and create opportunities for staff. Staff are the partners here. They are the partners in bringing the vision of everyone in this room, community together and implementing that work. And so, figuring out where does staff need to grow? Where do they need more training? Where do they hope to flex their leadership development is also something that I would be looking for in city management. I think it's crucial to do that as part of retaining excellent staff and helping them to thrive in their work over time. And, so I will be looking for those kind of things. And of course, where streamlining is appropriate, where jobs are no longer serving the priorities of the city, it's helpful to thin those out too. Regarding economic development of Montpelier, I have to understand what's been happening already. I think that it's crucial to have partnerships with your local chambers and your local business membership associations. I don't know a lot about Montpelier Alive. I think that that is one of the resources that do this type of work, and figuring out how far the reach is. You know, you can have local promotions of your amenities and events that happen here, but they can go regional as well and draw in broader demographics of folks. I definitely bring a lot of a touch point with Aspen being a success at doing that, to potentially help Montpelier with being a success at doing that as well. Again, I think the state needs to be a crucial partner because of what their staffing brings to the city in helping to identify economic development opportunities as well.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, so I'll get to you. Thank you. Before I do that, I want to just remind you two things. One is that we have 4 different spots for the QR code. We also have paper surveys that we're asking you to please participate via that survey instrument, because we're going to switch those out when we have a very quick break and we bring in the next candidate. So take a picture of those before we do break, because we're going to switch those out after we break. And with that, I'm going to ask gentleman here to close us out with the last question. So thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Zachary Hunter. Thanks for being here tonight. I think you could probably draw a through line between many of the challenges that we face and the limited housing production that we've had in our city for the last 20 and 30 years. I think as a response to the housing need, our city council has adopted a pretty aggressive approach to housing in our city plan. I think our planning commission has made some meaningful changes to our zoning regulations over the last several years that could improve housing opportunities in our city. However, in my experience, I think we're still really lacking public support. I think if you went and queried most people in our city, they would say, I support housing, absolutely. But the moment that housing is proposed in the vicinity of their neighborhood, we see a very different response. And so you identified some creative housing opportunities through ADUs and other types of market-based solutions. I'm curious how you could galvanize the community to say we support housing, full stop. I'm not proposing that we take a more casual view to the zoning regulations or anything like that. I think we still need a rigorous approach and process, but we also need a path that is predictable for all parties to be involved and can support the vision of the community, even if it might be in your backyard. So I'm just curious how you would galvanize the community to support housing more broadly.
Yeah, I've definitely had success doing that where I currently live. And again, I think it does require a balanced point of view, recognizing that some of the community tensions can be held with the goal of housing, and that you don't have to give up certain things in order to generate housing for a population that you may or may not want. I think that there are definitely narratives around doing that. I think that having success stories to turn to are going to be important in order to generate ongoing support. For example, the housing authority I sit on had really hit a low. We had really had a lot of criticism towards the housing authority about equity, about who it was serving, about whether we were being accountable to the program and having strong enough compliance within the program. And this was a challenge because it affected broader support in the overall housing program and the development and delivery of new housing. And, we have targeted that very intentionally in order to generate community support, because in truth, it is a community compact. It is an agreement between members of the community, the folks that are being served, and the government that is running it, to do that in a way that is succeeding, to do that in a way that is fair, to do that in a way that is a good steward of the resources being dedicated. And, so I'm very sensitive to that balance. I think a lot of times what happens is you chip away at a broader housing program. So you start with something that's maybe 250 units and you get it down to 150 units, and that feels more palpable to the community. There are trade-offs in that. There can be trade-offs in the overall cost. More units is going to bring down the cost per unit generally. And the community has to wrestle with whether they want to make that trade-off in exchange for maybe smaller scale, more appropriate density. These are definitely very reasonable community questions. Again, these are the trade-offs in values that the council ultimately is going to have to be accountable to the community for. And I think being able to achieve that balance in early projects sets you up for longer term commitment to a broader housing program. If you want to get to 1,500 housing units in 20 years, your first 75 need to be really well supported. And so that tension is going to be an important part of early approvals.
Thanks, Kelly. I'll ask you, as we conclude here, if you wanted to provide any sort of closing comments to the group as we wrap up.
Sure. Well, I'm very grateful to meet you all and for all of you who attended here this evening to ask me questions or to hear my replies. I am really hoping that whatever selection the council makes, that the community can be enthusiastic about it. I recognize that this has been a real chapter of disruption, and it's very challenging to have to live through that as a community, as a staff, as a council, to wrestle through that. And I recognize that the importance of your decision is going to help really pivot this into a new chapter for the city, and hopefully into some exciting and innovative solutions. Again, I think we have to look sometimes at the small wins and celebrate those as a community. The small capital city is going to have some small wins that are still going to be really important, I think, for moving your goals forward. I think I have creative ways to help you achieve that, and a lot of energy to do so. I have thick skin from my own political experiences, and we'll always recognize a good idea wherever it comes from. And so, sorry about that. I look forward to your consideration. I would be very enthusiastic about moving my life, moving my family to the city of Montpelier. It is a place, it's a place that resonates, I think, with sort of my personal outlook on life in the world, which is to be very contented and very grateful, and yet also have a commitment to ongoing improvement for myself personally. And I feel that here for the city of Montpelier as well. And so I wish you all luck in this transition, and I hope I'm here to help shepherd it through. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. We will have about a 5-minute break and stretch, but please remain if you can. And we do have those QR codes around. If you want to snap a picture of that and do a quick survey, we'd really appreciate it. So thank you. All right, we're going to get started here. So thank you all for sticking around. And if you're on the Zoom, thank you for your participation as well. We're joined by our second candidate, also a finalist for the position. Kelsey Young is here with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to her in just a second to open us up. We've got some questions that have been asked through the chat in here. And you did ask a question and I called on you before. I'd appreciate it if you could do that again too. And if there's other additional specific candidate questions, we obviously want to take those too. So with that, I will also say that we have swapped out, right? We swapped out the QR codes around the room. So they are separate for each candidate. So at some point in time, we'd ask you to please consider doing a survey response. So we really want to gain your inputs. I will again say thank you for being here and thank you for sticking around with us. We appreciate that. So Kelsey, I will turn it over to you to kick us off, and then we will get right into the Q&A.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So I'm Kelsey Young, and I am delighted to get to be here this evening. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm really looking forward to all your questions. So I have been a city manager for about 3.5 years, most recently in Panola, California, which is a population of about 20,000 with a shopping population of about 50,000. So who here has ever heard of Panola? Hey, excellent. All right, thank you. Oh, cool. So a Bay Area, East Bay person. Excellent. So for those of you who have not, Pinole is on the East Bay, so right across the bay from San Francisco. So a lot more congested and not nearly as many beautiful trees as here. But it's a lovely area. And then before that, I was city manager of Sweet Home, Oregon, which is population of about 10,000 with a sort of service area of a little over 20,000. And there's actually quite a few similarities that I've sort of noticed while I've been here. There are trees, there's not as much snow as you all have here, but a lot more rain. And so I enjoyed sort of the sunny day in the snow today. That was fun. Cold, but really fun. And let's see. And then before that, I was a finance director in California in a small city named Clear Lake, about 17,000. And there we had multiple fires. So I did a lot of disaster recovery, both leading through the fires, working with FEMA, working with Cal OES on all of the recovery. And then before that, most of my career was in Texas. So both San Antonio and Dallas. And there I did a lot of really big projects. So we had billion-dollar bond projects and lots of working on new airports, huge road projects, large community centers, and so forth. I loved my time there. I have been really blessed in that I have loved my time pretty much everywhere. But I also discovered that I like working in communities where I can get to know people a little bit more. And in San Antonio and Dallas, you got to know people to an extent. But even the staff of Dallas was 14,000 people. So getting to then be in projects and be city manager where you get to actually know and live in your community, and it's a tremendous honor. It's one of those things it's really incredible to be able to shape the community that you live in, that your kids grow up in, and to make the world maybe just a little bit better. So I'm really excited to be here. This is a cool city. It's really cold, and I keep saying that because I'm getting used to that. But even so, I was downtown today, and people were out and shopping, and the amount of vibrancy and diversity and restaurants and shops that you have, it's a really cool city, which I'm sure I don't need to tell you all, but I have to say, you definitely hit way above your weight class, and it's a really exciting place to potentially get to be a part of. All right, so thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to have a mix of questions that have been submitted via the chat or in writing as people arrived and or from the crowd. So I'll kind of be going back and forth on that. To kick us off, have you watched a council meeting? And how will you handle disruptive behavior during council meetings?
So I have watched a couple council meetings, and honestly, there wasn't really anything that was that unusual compared to some of the other cities that I have been in. So when there's a disruptive council meeting, all right, I'm gonna take a little step back and talk about my philosophy in general. So we're in an interesting time. And I think what we all are seeing right now is we're seeing community members who maybe have passion that they don't know exactly how to express. And I think we all have a desire to be more engaged. And I think after COVID, we found this this feeling of disengagement and also this fear that's started settling in about what are our futures going to look like? What is our future going to look like for ourselves? What is the future going to look like for our children? And what is the future going to look like for our community? And so I think there's a lot of feeling of wanting to be involved without necessarily knowing how to do so in a way that everybody else might find productive. And so I think there's a lot that can be done with community engagement. So if there's a disruptive council meeting, what I feel from that is a lot of passion that's coming through. And I think there's ways to start taking that energy and start using it in more collaborative and constructive ways. I think that type of shift takes time. And I think it takes a multifaceted approach. So I think there's ways to invite engagement outside of just the council meetings, having ongoing town halls, having ongoing citizens academy. I like to have office hours, but ways that you can have a lot of those conversations outside of the council meetings as well. And what I've noticed is the more we can do that, the more we can often start getting our council meetings back on track.
Thank you. Have you ever done or managed zero-based budgeting? And if so, do you think this would be a good way to handle challenging budgets that this city has been facing?
So Texas has zero-based budgeting, and California does not. And coming from Texas and then going to California, I was like this iron-fisted finance director because I was like, you can't do that. This is like imaginary money. We have to just be focusing on our actual budget. So maybe I think it's important to really look at budgets. When it comes to budgeting, I don't like to give quick answers because I think it's important to have a lot of conversations and really look into it. I think it is a way that I tend to lean towards, partially because that's something that I'm a little bit more familiar with. And the pro of having that type of budgeting too is you're doing things sort of on the front end and you're able to manage expectations in a way that I think sometimes is really critical. One of the worst things I think we can do in government is overpromise, especially in these times. I think it's really critical that we are able to communicate out exactly where we are financially and be transparent in that process all the way around. So I think it'd be worth looking into, let me put it that way.
Thank you. Question from the crowd before I go to my next one? Yes, sir.
And I promised I'd be more succinct, but I'm clearly not really doing that yet. So bear with me.
You're doing a great job. My name's Alex Geller. I'm just curious about organizational change. Have you led an organizational change effort? What were the biggest challenges? What did you learn? Did it work? What didn't work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And yes, I have. I think it's hard to have been a city manager right now and not have led that to an extent. I am a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and I also have some certificates in change management and some other areas as well. That's something I actually really enjoy doing. In my last couple cities, both of them have had pretty big deficits and have had some other transitions. We've had to do some reorging and some other things along those lines. So looking at how we can do so in a strategic and supported way is something that's really important and critical. Change management is one of those things that's really a hot topic right now. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. I got to learn from an amazing mentor named Dr. Schmidt, who loves to do this. It's called Disruptive Lean Six Sigma. And he had the idea, and it's this philosophy that incremental change is just as hard as huge overreaching change, but you have to do it over and over, so it can actually be even harder. I'm still trying to figure out if I feel that that's true in every circumstance. And so I think one of the things that's really critical whenever you're dealing with large change management is to really dig in and get to know the community and the group that you're going to be changing, and build it in a way that's going to be as most beneficial with them as possible, and also as collaborative as possible, because you want to get that buy-in. And you also don't want to get so excited about the idea of change that you lose the things that are really valuable as well. So, so I think it's important to sort of build something that's unique to those particular circumstances, and then to do so never in a vacuum. And then the other piece is communication. The biggest piece of any type of change or management or anything with any organization is making sure to communicate and over communicate. Nature abhors about vacuum. And so you fill up the vacuum with misinformation if you're not getting the correct information out there. And every time in my career, which is starting to feel really long at this point, every time that I have seen a project or a change or an organization really struggle, a lot of that has been with not being able to communicate it in a way that was really getting through to everybody so that they knew what to expect. Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges with change, is not knowing exactly what to expect, and that's scary. So making sure to not do that. Sorry, Ian, I'm trying.
No, you're good. You're good. What do you think the role of the federal, state, and municipal governments should be? What would you change? What's your philosophy about the role of each of the governments?
Wow. Okay, so that one, if we go into this, we will be here all night. So let me just start with a few things. And let me just start with sort of I don't even know where I was going to go with that. My overwhelming philosophy when it comes to being a part of the government is, particularly in this role, which to me is one of those roles that I love, municipal government. Municipal government impacts the community, and that is, it's the most underrated form of government possible as far as I'm concerned, because that is when you can really make a difference in the community and you can really see change happen. It's a lot harder as you get to larger government. And so municipal government, you are serving your community. And so your role is to lead the community in the way that the community requests. And that's it. And it's taken me a while to recognize that every community and every city actually gets what they ask for. And you see that in different ways. And the more that the community can understand how much of an impact that they have in those roles, the better, because then you can really get that community engagement moving forward in the direction that the community wants to see things happen. When it gets to state and federal government, it gets a lot bigger and messier. And right now, I think we are more divided than we have been, and which makes local municipal government, I think, even more important, because that is what you can shape. We can shape things, I think, in larger federal governments to an extent, but a lot of it is wishing on a prayer a little bit that things will move forward in the ways that you're hoping that they will. And there's a lot of things that are out of our control. States, one of the things that you all have here, which is really unique, is getting to be part of a capital city. And so here you are able to lead by example, to shape some of the policies and politics and processes that will move forward in the state, and develop those partnerships. And so I think that's something that's really exciting. And that's also something that's nice about being in a smaller state. In Oregon, we were able to have a lot more influence than we were in California. Texas is its own country, so we'll just let that be there. So I'm not sure I fully answered that question because that question's a lot, but I would say that I think that the more people can be involved in trying to shape things the way that they're hoping to see things moving forward, the more important or the more impact they can have. And as far as I'm concerned, that's sort of what the role of a local municipality is to try to listen to the people and do what they request.
Question from the crowd before I go to my, yep.
Tom McCollum. Hi, Kelsey. You've been a city manager in 2 communities, and you were not in either of those jobs for a really long time. And this is a job that typically people will stay in for at least several years. So why did you decide to move on from those 2 jobs?
Okay, great question. So neither job did I intend to leave quickly. And in Sweet Home in particular, we had put down a lot of roots and we're moving forward. We had some challenges that came up against me and my family where we were no longer feeling safe in the community, particularly my children. And unfortunately, we needed to move on. That being said, we went there for Thanksgiving still to see people. I still really care about that community and wanted to see everybody doing well. With Pinole has had some other challenges, and in Pinole, city managers don't typically stay very long. And that's honestly, I think, to the detriment of the community. And I'm hoping that it will change in a little while. I think you'll see some more background as to why that is if you follow the news in Pinole over the next year or so. And I wish them all well. I feel like we've managed to accomplish some amazing things there. We resolved a deficit. We brought forward the first 5-year paving plan, all sorts of other projects. We accomplished a lot in the time I was there. Now, that being said, my next role, please don't ever make me move again. So I am really looking for something where I can put down roots and stay long-term. I would like to say somewhere for at least the next 10 years. That would be my goal. And so I'm really hoping that my next role to find alignment beforehand and make sure that whatever I take, that's going to be our next direction. Because personally, it would be so much better for me and my family to not move. But I also feel like it's really for the betterment of the community to have some longevity and stability.
Kind of a riff off of that a little bit as far as the wanting the job aspect. Why do you want this job in the little city full of opinionated, overly educated people concerned about their taxes?
I love that description so much because it's funny because it's true. So that's actually why. You guys talk about a city of opportunity. I mean, it's a really neat city. It's full of educated people. It's the smallest capital. And I know you all don't like always that description, but it's also really cool. I mean, to get to be part of a capital city where you still get to know your neighbors and you can actually see the difference that you make, that is incredibly rare. I can't think of really anywhere else that has an opportunity like that. You've got really cool old buildings. You have really good restaurants. I'm still scared of the snow, but my teenage boys love that idea. And I have learned about snowmobiling today with heated seats, and that sounds really cool. So, you also, when you have some challenges, you have opinionated people, but a lot of that to me just is passion that needs to get harnessed and tackled and moving forward. You have some infrastructure challenges, but goodness, who doesn't? You have some potential budgeting challenges, but again, who doesn't? But you are also literally, you have the capital in your backyard. You can, there's so much you can do. I keep thinking about, oh, and then if I started, this is one of the things I would look into, this are different revenue sources and so forth. And so I just think it's an amazing place with tons of opportunity, and the opportunity to continue to be really noticed by the rest of the country, and to do things that no other city could really do in the same way that you guys can do here.
Question about trust. How do you build trust between the city staff and the council? And then also, how do you garner trust with your own staff as you build your team?
So this is a team, I think, that has been through a lot recently, has been through a lot of transitions, and a council that I think is excited for looking at different opportunity and trying to come up with a way to lead in the way that they're representing the community. And I think there needs to be some additional bridging that needs to occur. And I think it would be really beneficial all the way around. I'd love to do some potential workshops, some retreats, and some discussions of alignment. You guys have a city plan that is the best city plan I think I've ever seen. And that's not really a surprise. I mean, it's award-winning and so forth. It's also a lot. And it's a lot of projects. So I think that's going to probably feel a little overwhelming, to be quite frank. And so I think coming up with set priorities and set alignments and specific priorities that everyone's going to be moving forward, and then continuing to communicate that internally, communicate that externally, making sure that everybody's on the same page, I think is really important. As far as building trust is concerned, I think it's really critical to listen a lot. I think if I were to move into this role, I would be asking staff a lot of questions, how they're doing, getting to understand their expertise, getting to understand how they can, what they see as our opportunities and challenges, and working through with that. I'd also be doing that with council. I would really want to hear from council, and then I would try to help start some conversations between council and staff as well. Then we also have the community, because you need alignment between all three groups in order for any city to run well. And I see the city manager's role as trying to bring that alignment as much as possible, while also recognizing that a city manager can't fix it all. And it's just not possible. But you can bring forward some of those conversations. And if you can have a community, council and staff all in alignment, you can do amazing things. But it also is the responsibility of each of those three groups to also work on that as well.
Thank you. Any questions from the crowd before I go back to my written ones? Yep.
Thank you for being here. My name is Kate McCarthy. I have another question about change. You've heard about, you've articulated the problems that we're facing as a city. You've pointed out some of that is due to the complexity of the world, and it's not just Montpelier facing these challenges. I would say we might have some other problems due to inertia and fear of change. And so I wonder, as a city manager, how do you lead to help people, whether it's staff, council, or especially the public, be open to new ways of doing things, especially when we do love what we have. There's some certainty, we're human. So how do you help people see what's next and be open to change and innovation so that we can thrive?
Okay, so I love that question. And it's a really good question. And I'm sorry I keep saying that, but it is because I'm going to give you two answers for this. So I am someone who enjoys change. I came from a military family. I got to move. I got to be in different countries. I got to experience a lot of things. And there's actually even I love doing retreats and workshops and so forth. And there's this one exercise that I'm not going to tell you all, because if I come here, I want to be able to do it. But the entire exercise is you think it's about something else, but it's really actually about how you're going to deal with change. And when I went through it as a participant in the first time, I had fun. Like, this was a fun exercise, but I watched most of the people that I was with, and for most people, it felt really uncomfortable and even a little scary. And that was when I kind of realized, okay, I'm a little bit different. And I like to move at a speed that's faster than most people. And change doesn't scare me that much. I embrace it and I enjoy it and so forth. But doesn't matter, where I'm at. I need to look at where everybody else is at as well. And so I think there's two things with that. And this is where I think your question is so important. One, as I mentioned, there's a ton. Oh, thank you so much. There's a ton of opportunity here. There's tons of things that could be done, that could be next. And I think in exploring those and discussing those and being able to communicate those out to the community is really important. There's a certain amount of change that has to happen in all of our cities right now, when we're looking at population growth and so forth, because otherwise we actually end up not just being stagnant, but going backwards and we lose revenue and so forth. However, one of the things that I think is really important is, as I mentioned before, every city chooses the type of community that they want to be. And so if Montpelier were to move forward as a community embracing change, that's exactly what would have to happen, is the community needs to embrace that. And that's not something that any one person can do. They can help lead movements, they can help inspire, they can help excite, but at the same time, it would have to be a larger choice of the rest of the community if it's going to be fully successful. And so one of the things I have noticed in different cities that I have been in is there's often discussions of, we want all of these things to change, and we want all of this to move forward. But it's often, you can't push people. You have to inspire them to want to come along. Or you can, I mean, you can choose to just do it anyway, but then often you end up shifting the people who are going to be in your community. And that's a choice too. So it all comes down to, I think, a lot of additional discussions and choices on how the community wants to move forward. So that all comes back again to community engagement, discussions, and really deciding on set priorities.
Kelsey, what's the largest number of staff and direct reports that you have managed? And how did you maintain a balance between the need for both accountability and staff morale?
Okay, so I think the largest team that I have managed has been about 130 FTEs, plus some part-time and volunteers and so forth. And I had a team of executive team members of 10. And however, then there's multiple tiers down there as well. So the team is critical, and they're also they're really who gets everything done, and they're also made up of people, most of whom are going to be really cool, because most people who choose to go into this line of work tend to be pretty cool, because it's not an easy path to take. You have to want to give something back to the community to take this, because you can get paid more and a lot less stress in other roles. So balancing that is, I really believe in as much transparency as possible. And I know I keep saying that, but going back to having dashboards, having clear alignment, having clear work plans, talking about who exactly is responsible for what, that helps with not just getting the stuff done and keeping people accountable, but it also does help with morale, because you know what you're responsible for, you know what's expected of you, and hopefully you can mostly stick to that, because these days too, governments are so lean, you tend to be having to do a lot. So having those clear expectations can also be really, really encouraging and comforting for the team. And then I also, like I said, communication is so critical. So I have weekly executive team meetings. I have one-on-one with my executive teams. I also think it's important to have all hands meetings. That's something that has kind of gone by the wayside a bit after COVID. And I think it's really important. I'm somebody who's happy to see people coming back into the office. And I think there's a lot to be said with remote work, but I think there's a lot of synergy and energy that can be created by having the team working together. And so trying to have those clear KPIs and those clear expectations, while at the same time making sure to provide lots of support and so forth, I think is really important. I'm somebody who I really believe in leading by example. So if we're working on a budget and the director of finance is staying until 2 a.m., so am I, to make sure that those particular tasks are getting done and that they have the support to do it. We've had grants and stuff that have been the last minute, and I've stayed till midnight to help that grant get done, because I think it's really important to be able to both show that support, but also lead by example.
Thank you. Yes.
Peter Kalman. I'm actually going to ask a question that I didn't ask last time, because you said something twice now that is interesting, and I want to make a question about it. You said basically a community has to choose what it will be.
Mm-hmm.
We have an interesting community. Actually, we have an interesting two communities. We have a whole bunch of people, most of whom are here, who are seniors and who are living on fixed incomes and are living in houses that are too big for them. And then we have a growing community of young people who have children in school. They love the schools. You know, they're generally making good salaries. They're very busy. They're not here.
Yeah.
Those are two different communities. What is this community that's going to choose to be what it can be? Because us older people are kind of trapped because we can't afford to find a house that we can afford. That's silly what I just said, but how are you going to deal with those two communities?
So, that's, again, and I keep saying this, but it's also a really good question. And it's another dynamic that I think a lot of cities are going through right now. Not to try to state that this is, an easy thing to solve in any way, because it's not. That's part of what I think is going to be the challenge for the city. And again, that is where the community does choose. So here's what happens. The more that I think as a senior community, you can be involved and you can voice your opinions and you can talk to council and make sure that they're aware of the challenges that you're facing, the more that can then be put into place with policy. The city is also, as you mentioned, shifting. And I think that's one of the areas where we need to look at additional housing alternatives. And it's another area and room for opportunity where you can have the best thing from putting on my economics hat that you can have in a community is families moving in. So making space for both groups and treating both groups, with respect and hearing those voices as that policy is being made. That's kind of what I'm talking about, in that the community chooses who it wants to be by voting, by being involved, by being in the community engagement, and by working with your council on shaping the city to look the way that you want it to look. As a city manager, I do operations side based on what council directs us to do. I also have office hours and meet with you all and get to hear your ideas and also give council that perspective of what I'm hearing as well, so that when they are making decisions on the dais, they're getting as much information as they possibly can. So the community does choose what's going to be moving forward. Now, there's certain places, like, for example, the flood that you all had to endure. That is not a choice that you all went through. And there's a lot that you've had to do in order to rebuild after that. And I will say, in watching some of the news articles, reading some of the things, it's impressive the way that everybody came together and has been still working through that and supporting local businesses and so forth. And so I think you can tell from that type of dynamic and energy that came from that there's still a lot of amazing opportunity that can continue to move forward here.
Thank you. What's your philosophy and style around staff evaluations, performance appraisals, things of that nature?
Okay, yes. So I like that one. That's a very straightforward question. So I think it's really important to have staff evaluations. I think they should never, ever be a surprise. You should have a planning evaluation and then ongoing coaching and communication. And then I like to have staff evaluations where staff evaluates themselves. And then I evaluate as well, and it's fairly collaborative. And then we focus immediately on the next year and the goals, and it should include professional development and areas of interest as well. And I also think it should be on both sides too. It should also be an opportunity to hear how staff needs to be better supported, what a supervisor should be doing better, where there's having some particular challenges. But I also think that if there are any challenges with particular staff members, you need to address it as soon as possible, in as supportive of a way as you can. So moving forward with, hey, this is a concern. Let's talk about this. Where are you coming from this? What do you need in order to move forward? And this is what I would like to see. And I think, again, it should never be a surprise, and it should be something that's ongoing and very, very clear. And ideally, it's tied to goals that have already been discussed as well. So,
Thank you. There's a lot of talk about quote unquote affordability bandied about. What is quote unquote affordable in your opinion? And how do you make a city that everyone of all wage levels can live in?
So affordable is actually one of those terms that I'm not a huge fan of. I do prefer terms like attainable housing and so forth, because what is affordable, right? And I think that term changes quite a bit depending. So for example, I've been in the Bay Area. I make a good salary. I'm a single mom. I'll support my mom. And Bay Area is barely affordable for me. And still, like, I'll find certain things kind of challenging. And I'm in an area where I have my Honda CRV all-wheel drive, and I feel kind of fancy in it because this was my first brand new car that I was able to afford and buy for myself. It's like 4 or 5 years old, and I will be surrounded by Jaguars and Teslas. But I still love my CRV, and we'll stick with that. And I think this is a day and age where I wish like crazy I had a magic wand and a silver bullet that could fix this particular issue. I think it's really hard to solve this problem, and this is a challenge that I think is a challenge nationwide. Actually, more than that, globally right now. That being said, there are many creative options that can be out there. I love looking at housing. I love looking at different programs. I actually read about different types of housing techniques and building and affordability on my own time, which is never, but still. I also think what we consider to be attainable and what we look for has continued to shift. We are constantly looking at bigger and bigger houses. We're looking at more and more amenities. And so at some point, I think we also need to take a step back and be like, what can we do? Does it make sense to have, smaller spots? Does it make sense to do more of modular housing, and so forth? And so there's always options. Like I mentioned, I love housing. I love also working on other types of projects along those lines. But I think as a society, this is a larger issue as well. And so I think there's a lot of flexibility that could be done there. In Sweet Home, one of the things that we talked about is that we just need more housing at all levels and all price points. And I think that's one of the best ways in order to have that housing start to be more attainable, is there just being more of it.
Thank you. Questions from the crowd? Take a pause there for a second. Anybody? I've got some more queued up here. We have an aging, failing infrastructure, particularly in the area of water and sewer, not adequately maintained for 25 years, and the need for $50 to $80 million to address. How can you help create community and financial commitments necessary to start addressing this crisis?
Yeah, so I saw your wastewater treatment plant and your water treatment plant, and they're both actually in pretty good shape. What you have, I think, is some larger concerns having to do with your pipes, and that's going to be expensive. So in Sweet Home, we had a wastewater treatment plant that was completely failing and we had no funding for that. And I've been heavily involved in obtaining funding on figuring out both a small rate increase, also grant programs, also going to the state and asking for funding, and a few other things in order to move all of that forward. Very successful. It's now under construction and it's looking great. Aging infrastructure. Any city that was built before 1950, actually let's say 1990, is dealing with a lot of infrastructure challenges. And that's going to be a reality. So there's a lot of different ways to come up with various funding. In Pinole, we had about 120 million worth of delayed maintenance and infrastructure. And you start chipping away at it and recognize that things are the cheapest that they are ever going to be, just like we are all currently the youngest that we will ever be. So tackling that as soon as possible is critical in order to try to move things forward. So there's different ways. I was able to do a vehicle impact fee in Pinole that brought forward about 1.2 million for roads maintenance. Like I mentioned, I was able to do the rate increase, but grants, sponsorships, all of these other areas, bond projects, are the things that are going to have to be brought forward in order to tackle some of that, because this is the type of large funding projects that are only going to get more expensive and they're only going to get bigger as well. So again, when I talk about the community making choices, we're going to have to decide which ones are priorities and start tackling those and figuring out how to do funding. And there's lots of different funding mechanisms. Unfortunately, some of them will include rate increases or tax increases, but hopefully that can be mitigated with some grants and things as well.
Thank you. A question that came up from the Zoom. If you were to be selected for this position, and we're in the position 5 years, what would you like to be able to say on your way out? So I'm assuming you're leaving after 5 years with the way this question is asked. What would you say you would want your impact to be on the city?
Okay, well, first off, I don't want to be leaving after 5 years. But let's say we're having the 5-year anniversary and we're talking about, hey, this is what we've accomplished in the last 5 years. So I'm going to frame it in that way. So I would want to see some more housing. Ideally, I think I personally love the potential of the project with the Country Club Road project. I got to look at that property today and it's gorgeous, even with all the snow. Actually, the snow also made it gorgeous. But having housing, and then also I would hope for happy staff, hope for a little bit more of citizen engagement in a way that was hopefully excited about some of the projects that we're moving forward. I'd like to see the 5-year paving plan that is currently in place having been completed. I think it would be wonderful to have a stronger partnership with some of the surrounding cities as well as the state in general. I would have loved to have been able to say, hey, like on average, I tend to bring in a lot of grant funds. And so I would like to be able to say, hey, each year I brought in at least 10 times my salary, which is normally what I do. I have a track record of doing that, so I'd want to keep that up. And so forth. But mostly, I'd really like to be able to say that there is alignment with the council, the staff, and the community on the projects that we had been working on for the past 5 years.
Thank you. Pause there for a second, see if anybody's got any questions from the crowd. Not seeing any. We do have a couple more left here. Sort of in part related, answered this a little bit, but I'll ask it. We're a very old community without the housing or jobs necessary to support a younger cohort of population. What experience can you bring to create workforce housing in a city with a declining economic base and a fixed aging population? So we did talk a little bit about housing before, but maybe specific to this question is quote unquote workforce housing.
Yeah, so I've actually worked on some workforce housing projects in the past, and I'd be excited to do that again. Okay. So forgive me for this a little bit. I think Montpelier is amazing, and I think it wouldn't be too hard to bring in more jobs and development and so forth. I think you really are in a if you build it, they will come situation, because for being as small of a population as you are, it's really vibrant. You have the shops and the restaurants, you have the hospital close by, you have a really cool vibe. And it's one of those things that really would appeal, and I think is appealing to people. And so it's more of a invite them in, have places for them to live, and I think you're going to have people here. Now, that being said, I think you have a lot of opportunity too, for some smaller startups to start coming in, particularly in tech industries or light manufacturing. You have the really cool environmental sustainability vibe, for lack of a better term, but you already have a lot of that infrastructure and support culture here already. So I think moving forward with some workforce development housing is a good idea. I think one of the big important things is deciding as a community how much you want to grow and what you want that to look like, and then working backwards from there. People are looking for places right now where they can enjoy life. I think everybody's shifted a little bit after COVID and are really wanting to find an area where they feel that they can fit. So I think you can do that here. I think you just have to decide to do so.
Thank you. How do you manage work-related stress in your personal life?
So I have an amazing family who are incredibly supportive. And I really like to spend time with my two teenage boys who still like me, which is kind of cool and amazing, and like to spend time with me. And we like to do a lot of outdoor types of recreation. We love to hike, a lot of water sports, kayaking and whitewater rafting and things along those lines. And so doing things like that is pretty important to me. I also take time to just sort of reconnect with myself as well. My faith is important to me, so I take time to sort of recenter myself and follow that as well. And then I kind of live for this work too. So some things that are pretty stressful for a lot of people, they are, but it's also, you get some tremendous enjoyment from getting to do it. So I honestly live and breathe it. We went to Disneyland and I had to look at all the bricks and also their plumbing system. And I was way more excited about that. I look at manhole covers as I'm going around, and I literally read about housing on a regular basis. So what for some people is really stressful, for others can be fun. And that being said, I have way more gray hair than I feel like I should at my age. And like I said, I have, feel like I've had over 30, 40 years of experience, and I haven't been alive long enough for that to have been the full case. So, but I try to have a good work-life balance as well. However, being a city manager, you are on call 24/7. And so you better love what you're doing because it really is all encompassing.
Any other questions from the crowd or any on Zoom? Any hands up on Zoom? Okay. I have one last one up here and then I will ask again. How will you leverage technology to help bridge the gap between staff bandwidth and community demand for services?
Okay, cool. I'm glad I got that question. So, okay, so I think I mentioned earlier, I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. And so I love what that is it's a process improvement type of methodology. And you look at eliminating potential redundancies. You also look at shadow processes, and I really nerd out when it comes to all of this, so forgive me. And I really like different software systems as well. So I have implemented a lot of software systems throughout my career, taking people from, paper processes to a lot more automated processes. And then now we are in the scary age of AI. And there are some concerns with that. My ex-husband does cybersecurity for one of the largest AI companies in the world. So I know a lot about some of that. But it also brings in a lot of opportunity if you handle it correctly, particularly in the areas of sort of certain things with customer service, on ways to get answers back to the community quickly, on ways to do some of the data entry. And as long as you're really careful about any type of security breaches, which terrify me, there's a lot of opportunity there. Also, even outside of AI, there's a lot of different software processes that can improve workflows, that can improve transparency, that can really help appeal to the community and be able to bridge that gap with citizen engagement that people aren't always able to do as much as we would like to, just because of so many other projects. So that would be something that I would immediately be looking at. You have to also be careful with software because it's so easy to end up with too many software systems. And in fact, one of the budget strategies I've been able to do has been consolidating a lot of those and figuring out which ones make the most sense, and then making sure people are cross-trained and so forth. But even there's some really great stuff. Like even when we were at the wastewater treatment plant, you guys already have SCADA systems in place, so everybody can monitor things on their phones. And just being able to have technology like that, I think, is so critical, especially as we're having to become leaner and leaner and leaner. So that would be something that's fun to do. And I keep implementing it myself because I'm a big nerd when it comes to that. And that's also kind of fun.
Thank you. Last call for the Zoom or anybody here. Any remaining questions? Or Kelsey? Oh, okay, we got one last one.
Okay.
Yeah. You sort of answered, I've seen Con, and you sort of answered this, but I just want to ask again. I mean, most of the experience you've talked about has been out in California, Oregon, Texas, and here we are in Vermont. What brings you to Vermont?
So it is a bit of a leap of faith on my part. I'm going to totally admit that. So Vermont is a neat state. I mean, it's gorgeous. There's a lot of really neat things that you all are doing here. I went to Humboldt State University, and I think half of my classmates were from Vermont. And they all became my best friends, and they were all like, "You would like Vermont," and I think it's really true. And even just wandering around today, I keep having these really great conversations with people. In fact, I was almost late here just because I was talking to people in my hotel, and they were really cool, and they like live here and so forth. And so I think it's a really good culture fit for me. And then all of the outdoor activities, still scared of the snow, but the rest of it is pretty exciting. And again, there's that heated seat with the snowmobiling, so it might work out. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I have a military family, so my family is spread out all throughout the country. And we don't have somebody representing Vermont, so apparently we need to. But I think this is a really cool opportunity. And I know it's kind of late and we're all getting a little tired, but getting to spend today here has been so much better than I expected. I'm really scared of snow, so you just have to forgive me on that. But it's a really neat place, and if it can be this neat while it's only 5 degrees, then that says a lot about a place. So that's pretty much why I'm interested. And then also just for the job itself, my experience with some of my past cities has made me kind of uniquely qualified for the exact challenges that this particular city is dealing with right now. And sometimes I think fate has a way of bringing things together when it's supposed to happen.
Thank you for that. Before I ask you if you had any concluding comments, I want to remind the audience members and those on Zoom, please participate in the survey. QR codes are around here, so please, snap a photo. It's a very quick survey. Really do value your input and appreciate your consideration of doing that survey. So with that, Kelsey, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you all for coming out and for some really thoughtful, hard-hitting questions. And for staying. I mean, it's past 8 o'clock and you all are still here and you're awake. And so I appreciate that. And just thank you for this opportunity. And thank you for inviting me into your city for today too. And like I mentioned, everybody's been really welcoming. It's a really neat place. And so whether I move forward or not, I just want to wish you all the absolute best. And thank you again. I would say the community I think I would really love to be a part of. And again, I'm excited for your future, whether I'm a part of it or not. I think there's a lot of really great opportunity. And I know there's been some challenges, but I think there's a lot of excitement that I hope you all are feeling as you look at the next few years, because I think I think you have an opportunity to really show the rest of the country even what this place can be and what other cities could do as well. So on that note, thank you again and happy holidays to all of you.
Folks, as we wrap up, once again, I want to give thanks to our candidates for being through this whole process and coming here to meet with us. The city council for all the many hours of work that they put into reviewing and evaluating all the candidates and getting us to where we are now. Ian and his team, which was an impressive piece of work and a great range of candidates that were attracted, and especially Tanya Chambers and Evelyn Prim for all the work they did to manage this process, which has been tremendous. We have our regular city council meeting on Wednesday night, and part of that will be discussing the hiring process and where we go from here. So I invite everyone to make sure you fill out the surveys either online or in paper. And we'll see what happens on Wednesday night. And with that, at 8:13 p.m., we are adjourned. Thank you all.